I'm going to look down. We made notes so that we can keep ourselves focused. So yeah, a couple things that'll be relevant to what we're talking about today. That from our bios. So Rebecca used to be an attorney and represented tribal governments, and that'll come up with some examples today. So not usually relevant background in this kind of conversation, but same with this. So behavioral economics and decision science is part of my background, and we talked about that a bit last time, but for the 21 new people. And then yeah, we're both serial entrepreneurs and really like being focused on humans and what they're trying to accomplish. So we will talk about them as customers, but like, yeah, it's human beings, right? So, okay. So what we're going to talk about today, we have just a short outline. We know some people are already familiar with the concept of jobs to be done or jobs theory. We've talked to some of you all about it, and it's come up in various places, but it's such a helpful framework to us that it's at the center of every entrepreneurial project we launch. It's at the center of every set of customer interviews we do for clients. It's the framework we build everything on. And so we wanted to talk about it, what a job to be done is, how to write a good job to be done statement, and how to use jobs to be done theory in interviews. So we'll call them JTBDs for short. So when we say JTBD, we're talking about a job to be done. Can just like quick show of hands with the people we can see, who has heard of a job to be done? Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
That's helpful. Okay, thank you. Awesome. And then, yeah, so one quick note before we dive into it is that this concept really helps us focus on customers' perspectives rather than the perspective of our service or our product or consultancy or music festival or whatever it is that we're working on, even though those things are wonderful in their own right. So it's what is it that the other people want, right? So that desire for something needs to exist independently of whatever it is we're trying to make. So yeah.
If you're a solution looking for a problem, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah. But if you know what it is that other people are trying to accomplish and then make something to help with that, then it's a lot easier to just like put your train on their railroad tracks, if that makes sense. Okay, and I know a lot of this is familiar from things that are not just jobs theory, but jobs theory helps us.
Yeah. So Clayton Christensen developed the jobs to be done theory. He was at Harvard Business School, but passed away, I believe, last year. So just to define it, a JTBD is a particular type of progress a customer struggles to make in a distinct context. I'm going to say that one more time. It's a particular type of progress a customer struggles to make in a distinct context. And maybe Jonathan is writing
I'm going to type it in, yeah.
So that means regardless of product, regardless of solution, it's really the desire for progress. That's the core thing. So let's unpack my previous life's job. So I, like Jonathan said, I worked as an attorney for 7 years. I represented tribal governments. So my job title was attorney. But that wasn't really what I was hired to do. And so my day-to-day work was writing briefs, conducting oral argument in court. Those things also weren't what I was hired to do. Those were the method. They were not the end goal. So I worked in a lot of different contexts, but here's an example, kind of a real one, kind of not, of a client desire for progress.
All this stuff has to be obscured.
So tribes wanted, and still do want, their waterways to flow cleanly, and knowing that was critical. If I thought my job was just to make a case in court, I would have failed. So there are always 4 building blocks to each JTBD. So one building block is a distinct context. So in this context, water goes onto tribal land and out of tribal land. There's no isolation. We're all connected. And so my clients had a long history of relationships with various other governments as well. So cities, counties, states, the federal government, and also non-governmental entities like corporations that impacted the water that flowed onto the land and out from the land. So that brings us to the second building block, which is, where did I just lost my notes? Thanks. A particular type of progress. So the context creates the desire for progress. And the desire for progress here is help waterways flow cleanly. But there were barriers to that progress. And that's the third building block. So what are the barriers to progress? So some governmental entities built dams that stopped the flow of water onto tribal land, or corporations built oil pipelines that polluted waterways, or they allowed mines to contaminate the waterways, that kind of thing. So those created barriers to the progress of helping the waterways flow cleanly. And that brings us to the fourth building block, which is a hard stop. The to be done part of the job to be done statement is important. So at some point, water's too polluted to be useful anymore, or there's not enough water on site to use. So I had deadlines in those relationships. I had court deadlines, I had negotiation deadlines. The job did not extend forever. So there needs to be a way and a time by which the job needs to be accomplished. So that brings me to you.
Cool. So I'm going to give another example. And we're, not trying to belabor this point, but it is like these building blocks might seem obvious, but when we break them down in customer interviews, they really help us drill down and go like, okay, this is what is happening out there in the wild. It's what's creating the frustration. So when Christensen first proposed this theory, he gave another example of it that has become iconic. And we shared a little bit about this last time during Q&A, and it's milkshakes, but it's worth unpacking it in detail. So
4 o'clock is a bad time to talk about milkshakes.
Yeah, that's true. I'm getting a little hungry. So, but this is a different job to be done. We'll see. Okay. So, and just so you know, like if anyone has any questions or feedback or anything, please feel free to interrupt us or just chat, throw something on the chat thread. So we're casual about this. Okay. So this story involves the mysterious sale of a bunch of McDonald's milkshakes at 6:30 a.m. And McDonald's had been trying to increase their milkshake sales using typical sales tactics. So their marketers tracked down people who matched what they thought of as their milkshake customer persona, right? And the marketers asked those people how to improve the milkshake. And they gathered evidence about customer preferences. So they're doing customer interviews, right? And they changed the product to match what they learned in customer interviews. And it made exactly zero impact on sales. Like nothing changed at all, even though they had done their research. So then Christensen's team was hired to come in and consult and use the jobs to be done framework instead of just looking at customer preferences. Just to check in, how's everyone doing? Like thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, cool. There's, with this time of day, we're starting to get tired. And so it's hard to get, when everyone's muted, it's hard to know where we are. Okay, so, so Christensen's team was analyzing the data and they noticed that someone was buying milkshakes early in the morning. And in fact, many someones all over the world were buying milkshakes early in the morning. And these customers didn't buy any other food. They never drank the milkshake at the restaurant. And the marketers who had this data had absolutely no idea why this was happening. right? So here's what Christensen's team did and discovered. They went to a bunch of McDonald's, which is like, is so much less magnanimous of an example than Rebecca's example. It's like trying to sell more McDonald's milkshakes, but it makes the point. It makes the point. Okay, so they went to McDonald's at like 6 a.m. and just interviewed a bunch of people who were buying milkshakes as they're like pulling out of the drive-thru. And they discovered that all these customers had long, boring commutes to work, and the milkshakes entertained them while they were filling up their stomachs on their drive. So the milkshakes took 23 minutes to drink on average. And the customers talked about how milkshakes kept their stomachs full well past 10 a.m. So we can break their building blocks down into the same, or we can break their Jtbd down to the same building blocks as Rebecca mentioned. So building block number one, we're just going over this again to make sure it's clear. They had a distinct context, right? So they had a long, boring drive. And on that drive, they had hungry stomachs, and they had at least one hand locked on the steering wheel, which really impacted them. Building block number two, there was a particular type of progress they wanted to make. You were that customer? Did you buy a milkshake early in the morning?
Most often it was late at night when I was commuting home 90 miles every day, sometimes early in the morning, but yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Nice.
Okay, cool. So yeah, for these customers, they wanted to feel entertained. They wanted to feel engaged with the world, right? There's just like all of us in quarantine, there's just not that much going into our brains. So these humans wanted to like interact with something that jolted them back to life. So notice that this progress has nothing to do with healthy eating, sadly. Notice that it has nothing to do with ethically sourced ingredients, sadly, right? But it is what the customers just didn't care about that. They didn't hire the milkshakes to help them feel healthy, and they didn't hire the milkshakes to help them feel ethical, right? They hired them to feel entertained. So building block number three is barriers. So the context created barriers. So they could only eat with one hand at a time. They needed to arrive at work looking clean and professional. And you could tip a milkshake sideways in one hand, and it's so viscous that it won't spill, right? So that's different than like a donut or a bagel with cream cheese. And then building block number four is a hard stop. So the job to be done needed to be complete by the time customers arrived at work. They weren't trying to drink milkshakes perpetually for the rest of their lives. They weren't trying to, well, yeah, the context of the commute created the desire for entertainment, and then remove the commute and the Jtbd disappears, right? So there's an end point to it.
So Meg, I'm guessing that you're not just buying milkshakes every night, late at night, now that you're not commuting 90 minutes or miles or whatever you said.
Yep. And if you are, that's totally fine too.
It is totally fine.
Yeah.
I like ice cream at night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to keep track of those?
Yep, I got it.
Anything we need to?
Yeah, fourth building block was.
Looks like we've got it written down.
Oh, got it. Thank you. Hard stop. Nice work. Yeah, hard stop.
Okay. Yeah. So customers use 10 a.m. on average as a point of reference for evaluating the milkshake's effectiveness at filling their stomachs. So they weren't, the job to be done didn't extend into lunch or dinner. It wasn't evaluated by its ability to cure hunger forever, right? So yeah, that's the concept. Moving on from the four building blocks, we can always describe a Jtbd in a single sentence. So Rebecca and I and other people who use this framework call this a Jtbd statement. So the Jtbd statement from the milkshake customer's perspective might look something like this. Excuse me. I want to feel entertained while filling my stomach on my boring commute to work. So notice that Jtbds are not lofty goals. Lofty goals are great, but Jtbds are not lofty goals. The statements are concrete, they're specific, they're a tightly defined type of progress a person struggles to make in a distinct context. And if we can define it that way, we can just like figure out what's creating the pressure, and then how is it that we can help people when they're under pressure. So
Okay,
yeah,
we're going to talk a little bit about products for a second. So when we talk about a product, we're talking about anything that is sold to customers to remove their barriers to progress. So that can be physical, that can be digital, it can be a one-time act or an ongoing service. If customers are paying you to remove barriers to progress, then you have a product. And when we talk about customer problems, we're talking about JTBDs. So what is it that customers want? What's standing in their way? How can we help them make that progress? We might think of a drill bit as a product. So to paraphrase Theodore Levitt, people don't want a 1/4-inch drill bit. They want a 1/4-inch hole. A drill bit is a product that helps customers make that progress. So 3M, the company, decided to follow that idea upstream. Why do people want a 1/4-inch hole? They discovered one group of customers wanted a 1/4-inch hole so they could hang photos on the wall. But hanging photos doesn't require a 1/4-inch hole. So 3M didn't invent another drill bit, they invented double-sided tape. So we need to understand customers' desires for progress. That's the whole point. And then we can design solutions to help them. And it can help us think so much more broadly about what those potential solutions can be than if we're just sort of trying to fit our solution onto what it is that customers are telling us.
So yeah, just to bring in the milkshake example for how that works. Yeah, so Christensen's team interviewed a bunch of milkshake customers to map the JTBD first. And then they used the JTBD to spec out what they thought would be a best-selling product. So it's the ultimate milkshake. It's geared toward feeling entertained while filling your stomach on a boring commute to work. And here's what they recommended. Make the milkshakes thicker so they take even longer to drink, longer than 23 minutes. Add tiny chunks of fruit that get sucked up through the straw at random intervals and jolt customers out of their highway hypnosis. Install freestanding milkshake machines with prepaid swipe cards so that customers can grab milkshakes fast and jump back on the highway and not wait in line. And so notice, like, this is the kind of thing where I personally do not like chunks of fruit in any beverage that I have. And so if I were doing the market research and I weren't actually asking customers what they were trying to accomplish, or if I were asking them about features, I might be like, oh yeah, let's just steer clear of this thing that strikes me as gross and a lot of those people as gross. When like what they want is to be entertained. And so it's like this random thing is like, boop, boop, and so yeah, so McDonald's, remember that the demographics-based market research did not improve any of their sales of milkshakes, and asking customers about features didn't improve their sales. But understanding the JTBD and then building a product to match quadrupled their sales almost immediately.
So it's not even that the marketers, it's not that they didn't interview or it's that they didn't ask the right questions and they didn't have it based around the framework that would actually help them discover the customer needs. So you can interview until you're blue in the face and still not get the information you need.
Because if all we're doing is trying to go out and find people who want what we're already building, we're just like wasting a lot of time, So do you mind keeping an eye on this if I'm?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking about bubble tea myself.
Is bubble tea?
It's those tapioca.
Oh yeah. But is it something we should chat about?
No.
Okay.
It's fun.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So another thing to notice here is that McDonald's didn't need a milkshake to understand this JTBD. 3M didn't need to show customers double-sided tape to learn what they wanted. In terms of hanging photos on a wall without damaging the walls, right? So products aren't necessary for interviews. And in fact, often including our products or services or whatever it is we're trying to share with a community, that can sometimes derail interviews because it narrows how people are thinking about this, just to what it is that we're suggesting. So usually in the earliest stages, we don't involve we don't discuss products at all with potential interviewees. Or if we do, it's at the very end of the interview after we've learned everything else that we want to know about the JTBD. So yeah, so that's products. And then let's see. Okay, so we're going to shift into like a group-wide workshop here, if that's cool with everybody. And so what we're thinking we could do is that, let's just run through the workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me pause before we do the workshop. Any questions on the 4 building blocks or anything we've talked about so far before we get into this?
Going
Okay.
once, going twice. All right.
Continuing. You can always write them. Okay, cool. So here's what we're going to ask everyone to do. If you can have a place where you can write, write down if for the project that you're doing personally as part of this program.
Do first quarter students have a project? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Okay. So just take a crack at writing a JTBD statement. So from your customer's perspective, or the humans you're working with, if you don't have customers, yeah, what progress do you think they're trying to make? And it's got to be one sentence. And usually we start with the words I want. Like I want to. And so it's really from the customer's perspective. So everyone just take a minute to do that. I'm going to give you 45 seconds. It doesn't have to be good. Pull up what we need to share. All right. Awesome. Okay. Boom. Okay. There it is.
Okay, cool.
Oh, let's see.
Yeah, subtitles are great.
So cool. Let's see. Let's make sure. Just one sec, everybody, while you have your cool. Awesome.
Sorry, what was the question prompt again?
Okay, so it's can you write a JTBD statement from your customer's perspective for the project that you're doing as part of this program?
Thank you.
So what progress do you think they're trying to make?
Yeah. So again, generally they begin with, I want to blah.
Yeah.
So for like the example I gave with the tribal governments, I want to keep our waterways clean or improve the cleanliness of our waterways, something like that.
And we're going to keep moving because we only need one person for this workshop. So what we're going to do is say that if you're open to workshopping your JTBD statement with the whole cohort here, then we'll go through and look at how we do quality assurance on these statements. And then we end up using these statements in interviews. So if you're willing to volunteer, do you mind typing your JTBD statement in the message to everyone? And don't hit return yet. We're just gonna have everyone. Oh, awesome. Okay, we've got some willing folks. Okay, so if you can type it in, what we're gonna do is just say, count down from 3 and then everyone hits submit and then we'll look at one that might be like a good example to work with. Okay, so ready, type it in and we'll go 3, 2, 1, hit return. Okay, we got some.
Look at all you lovely people.
Okay. Oh, we've got a lot coming in.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Let's just give it a second for him to arrive.
I love this program.
I do
You all
too.
are awesome.
And then while these are rolling in and we're looking at them, if everyone can look up above, we shared a document that we're all going to look at to workshop the JTBDs. And it's labeled JTBD workshop.
Let us know if you have trouble finding it.
Yeah, if you
or
haven't seen
opening it.
Okay, so let's just scroll through here and you and I will see if anything sticks out. Sorry, everyone's going to take a sec.
I want to do all these.
I do too.
You all are good.
Yeah. Okay. These are awesome. Okay, these are really, really good. Here, I'm wondering if we want to do, how do you feel about that one since it's like very present right now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so Chantel, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
No, that's correct. I had a feeling you were going to call on me. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, because we're all engaged in it right now. So, okay, so we're going to go through this JTBD checklist and work with Chantel's statement. So I'm going to just type it in. So it's at the bottom. And here we go. This is the one we're going to work with. And maybe we can work with more if we have time. But okay, so this is one we're going to workshop. So if you can open up that JTBD workshop PDF if you haven't had the chance.
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're just going to make sure that this statement does each of these things as a cohort. And so if there are ways you can think of improving this statement, type in an alternative version. So we're going to start just from number 1.
And not just Chantel, if anyone can think of
If
a way
anyone,
to improve. And also just know, I know that you all have a wonderful environment of feedback and growth and learning. And so I'm not too worried about this, but we destroy our first draft JTBD statements every single time.
Yeah.
So, and actually we enjoy it.
We literally just went through this workshop for our work with a client like an hour ago.
Yeah.
So
know that like when there is room for improvement, that is a great thing. It's to be expected. It's not, there's nothing negative about that.
Mm-hmm. So number 1, and this is a really good starting JTBD statement also.
Yeah.
Write from the customer's perspective and not your product's perspective. So yeah, is this from the customer's perspective and not the product's?
I think so.
I think so too. Okay. Anybody else see ways to improve it based on that or make it more customer centric? Okay. Be specific. Yeah. Thanks. Tara or Tara?
Tara, like pterodactyl.
Nice. That's a helpful mnemonic. I'm gonna remember that for the rest of my life now. Okay, so next up we're looking at be specific. So are there ways to make this more specific? Ooh, okay, here we go. I want to feel included and be in a community where I can be acknowledged. What type of spaces, office or play? Oh, okay, so we're talking about specific types of virtual contexts. Can we make it more specific on that front?
On the context.
On the context front? Yeah, so we have virtual spaces, but are there more specific contexts in virtual spaces? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, kind of everyone, but yeah, how would you update it, Chantel, if you were?
Well, in our venture, we're focused on facilitation in meetings in like small groups, but also virtual events that can range from any amount of people. I didn't want to be too specific and say like a platform that you would use for a virtual space. So I'd love to hear like feedback on that. But
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to avoid words like platform, especially with the Jtbd checklist where we're going with it. But yeah, let's see if we're talking about work or play. Let's just say, so your customers, it sounds like you're focused on end users, right? Rather than the customers who are your clients who are setting up, paying you to start the events, right? So we're talking about the people who would be engaged in the events.
yes.
Okay. And so, yeah. So virtual space, we could have office or play in either of those, right? So we don't want to overly narrow it because it could include either one. And then included in community. Now, is that relevant, do you think, Chantel? Is community
Yeah.
relevant?
I definitely think so. Because we're working with like nonprofits as well. So I think that would tie in well.
Okay.
Mhm.
So are there ways we can improve this based on what we have just learned so far? I want to feel engaged with community.
Yeah.
How's this? While being in virtual spaces?
Mhm.
Is that
Yeah.
okay? Cool. Write a grammatically correct sentence. Are there ways we can? How about a period? That one's a pretty easy one. Anyone else see ways we can improve that? It's like the least exciting step. Okay. Use terms consistently. So is there anything that's, oh, let's see, Gavin has, would the separation in customer needs between work and play warrant multiple Jtbd statements?
Great question.
Awesome question, Gavin. Yes, most definitely. So yeah, later on, I guess, yeah. So number 9 in this is avoid words like and, which we did when we got rid of involvement and engagement, right?
Acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement and engagement. Because we're really talking about 2 different desires. So yeah, if we were talking about play versus an office context, we would want 2 different Jtbd statements. But our current statement doesn't have that issue. So yeah, are there any terms we're using inconsistently here? Doesn't seem like it.
And I will say on the be specific front, just jumping back a little bit, if you are targeting a specific group, and so like let's say you decided we're going to target nonprofits and it's a work environment, then it would be better to have a more specific statement that was, maybe I want to feel engaged with community while in virtual meetings, or something that triggered that like work kind of context. And it can be really, because people who are jumping on Zoom to chat with their friends have a different job than people who are jumping on Zoom to do their work. And so you can address those things better in more specific contexts. But because we're working with a little bit broader one, let's keep going with it.
That's a good point. Yeah. When I added the period and made it correct, I didn't have the right statement. So here's the current one down at the bottom there. And then number 5, double check that the statement could exist in the same form regardless of available technology. So would the statement work if smartphones, cars, rockets, etc. didn't exist? Anyone have any opinions about this with virtual spaces? So I'm going to give a little background on this. Part of what we do is that we want to identify a human desire for progress, right? So the context can be here, but virtual spaces kind of assumes I think it creates too much of a role for the context. So here's an example of how we might be able to change this to maybe match a more universal human desire, or it doesn't have to be universal, but this is not the cleanest phrasing, but there's a way to update it. I want to feel engaged with community while I'm physically separated from others. Now we're not using technology in the statement, right? And so the virtual space can be a place where we can connect with others.
It's one way of solving that problem.
One way, but now the JTBD statement is more solution agnostic. Does that make sense? Where it could work for a lot, where a lot of people be like, yep, that's me. And then if you say, cool, we have these virtual spaces where we're facilitating that, all of a sudden, bam, it's a
yeah. And one way
powerful.
One way to just kind of test that is to go, okay, if I'm back in like 1500, do I have the job that I want to feel as a part of the community in virtual spaces? Like, no, you don't, because virtual spaces don't exist. But you do have the job that you want to be in community, even when you're physically separated.
Yeah. So we'll go like, what about, would this have worked in first century Rome? Right? So like, I want to be entertained while filling my stomach on my long, boring commute to work. Like, yeah, maybe you're like being drawn behind a horse in a cart, but like the JTBD can still exist, and so those are the most powerful JTBDs. Yeah, definitely. Great point. That opens up more long-term market potential.
Exactly.
And like taps in. I'm like, oh, I feel this JTBD now, honestly. Feels like dorky to say that in response to quality assurance checks, but like, I feel it. Okay. Make the statement usable in downstream activities. So could we adapt this statement? Could Chantel adapt this and say, ask questions like, do you ever try to feel engaged with community while you're physically separated from others?
Yep.
Right? So it passes that test?
Passes that test.
Or how do you try to engage with community when you're physically separated from others? Right? That passes a test. Can anyone else think of ways to improve it to help with those activities? All right, we're going to call it. Avoid mentioning. So I'm just going to read this list. Everybody scan the statement and let's make sure. Technology.
With the updated version.
We're good?
We're good.
Solutions. We don't want solutions mentioned. No products mentioned. No services. No features. And no specifications.
I think the updated version passes all
does
of
it?
that. You feel engaged with community while I'm physically separated from others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
What do you mean by specifications? Because the other question on the first page was be specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the exact same root. Yeah. So, so this, I think for our process is usually product specs would be the term. So like if you were saying, let's see, what do we have right now? I want to feel engaged with community while I'm physically separated from others.
On a 4G network.
Yeah. It's like the specifications of the solution is what's happening rather than like being specific in the desire.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it almost is, it's very similar to a feature.
Yeah.
Or a product description.
Probably,
Yeah.
Feature and specifications redundant.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this and see.
Does it matter to define engaged?
Ooh, good question.
So is engaged too ambiguous to be meaningful? Is, I think, the question there.
Yeah, great question. So I wonder, the way we would typically address this in our own when we're workshopping evidence from interviews is we would say, like, just what are synonyms? And are one of those like a better fit with the evidence that we have, right? So yeah, Kim, so I want to connect, right? Like connect might have more emotional salience than engagement. So let's see if we can say, I want to, let's keep it, we need to, I want to feel connected with community while I'm physically separated from others. Okay, just like quick show of hands, who feels more attuned when we say, I want to feel engaged with community? Who feels that statement more than connected? Okay, engaged. Who feels more let's see, hands went up at different times.
There were, yeah, okay, 1, 2, 3, engaged. All right.
All right. 1, 2, 3, connected. Looks
Not
like
that
not
different.
Like
that
there's
different, but it looks
a
like,
difference between engaged and connected. And
yeah,
so it's hard to choose because you can be engaged with what's happening but not have that connection.
yeah.
So I don't know.
So it's an awesome point. Okay, so here's what we would do. Typically in the wild, we would say, we just put both statements in front of people, not usually at the same time. So if we were interviewing people, we'd split our interview pool of candidates, and we would ask them, so how much do you identify with the following statement? And then give them one version. And then give the other half of the interviewees, it's A/B testing, exactly. So give the other half of the interviewees engaged, I forget which I said, engaged and connected.
Mm-hmm.
And then just see what is the average resonance score? What do people resonate with most, right?
And the objective here isn't to get necessarily a perfect JTBD statement. The objective is to get a good enough JTBD statement that you're getting people to identify with it, to feel like they resonate with it.
Right.
And you can definitely improve it through interviews as you learn from folks. So, it may be that engagement, maybe the idea you want to get at is participation. So maybe it's better to say, I want to participate with my community, even though I'm physically separated from them. Maybe that gets at the idea better. But you can test these different different ways of doing it.
And we talk about this a bit we're going to share another long list of interview questions. But one way we get at this is we ask people on a scale of 1 to 4, how strongly do you identify with this statement? And then we say, are there ways we could change it so that it applies better to you? And then we just hear people give the feedback over and over and over. And it helps us zero in on I think what we're dealing with now isn't real, it's personal preference. It's not about specificity. So choosing between these types of words. So we really need to get evidence from the actual interviewee pool.
These are great points. James, it's interesting how there would be an interview for the interview question and that it's Hilani, am I saying that right? Yes? Okay. And that it's very cyclical. These are, hopefully what we're doing is setting up virtuous cycles where we're continually learning and iterating and improving to the point where everything becomes easy.
So yeah, and it's, they're feedback loops. And so the same thing happens when this kind of statement is used in marketing materials on a website, right? Instead of it's, I want to, it's, engage with community while you're blah, blah, blah. And you can just see, okay, how do people interact with that? You could A/B test it on a website. And there was one where someone said, Christina, could you give an example of one with something like services? Totally. This statement doesn't necessarily apply, but if it were something like, if the end of the JTBD statement included, while I'm in a therapy session, right? Or
we could look up at the other
examples,
student examples too. Okay, so Adams, I want to easily communicate with my coaching clients and engage them in their development process.
Mhm.
So we have a sort of similar statement using engagement, but this is a service because it's coaching. So that would be an example of one with a service. And I don't know if we have time to walk through it.
I say, do you mind if we finish the exercise?
No,
And then,
yeah.
Okay. I think in the same way that you don't want to mention a product, you don't want to mention a service, and a service is usually an ongoing relationship, which is just a form of product. But yeah. So I don't know if that actually helps, but okay. So awesome.
Okay,
cool. Avoid process words like follow up, check, or review. So this is number 8, is our current statement where let's just go with engaged, since that was the first version and we don't have sufficient evidence to overcome that. So does this statement, I'm just going to pop it back in here, include any process words like follow up, check, review, that kind of thing?
No.
Okay. And this point in 8B, it can be useful to ask, would the customer want to do this JTBD for the sake of the JTBD? If not, it likely needs to change, because it's not the actual desire that they have, right? So we were looking at client work earlier, and there's a lot of our interviewees from a recent process were talking about increasing revenue, right? And it could seem like increasing revenue is the end goal. But what they're actually trying to do is fund the mission that their nonprofits have. And they're much more motivated by the mission than they are money, right? So if we just said like totally in isolation, would you want to just increase revenue? You can't do anything else.
You're increasing revenue for the sake of increasing revenue.
They'd say no, because what they're trying to do is keep their nonprofits' missions going. So it's all about figuring out, like, is this the actual desire that they have, or is this a process that they're using to address a real desire that they have? So that's why we want to get rid of words like follow up or check or review. These are like usually things that have to do with solutions, not with a desire for progress.
And we'll talk about this more in a second, but another way to get at that is to ask, what would you change if you had a magic wand about X? And so with this particular job we're talking about, so many of them were like, my organization would be fully funded, so I don't have to think about this. So if they're saying they don't care about funding, they don't want to think about it, then that's clearly not their job.
Mm-hmm. Their job is, has to do with promoting the mission of their organization. So then number 9, we'll just to wrap up this exercise, avoid using and or, which Gavin pointed out earlier. So are we using the words and or in here? So when we started out, we had
engaged and acknowledged.
Yeah, engaged and acknowledged. So those would be 2 separate JTBDs. So we'd want to split those out and test them because they're 2 different potential motivators, right? Like, and what motivates people most strongly? Let's focus on that and really dial that in. So they can both exist. We're like infinitely complex beings, right? We can have all of these internal motivations, but when it comes to understanding what a product or service is accomplishing, we want to focus on that. And then 10, be as brief as possible given the other requirements. Are there ways to shorten this? So I'm going to give an example of a way to shorten it, and then we could just look at where the conversation's going. One way I thought about shortening it is I want to engage with community while I'm physically separated from others. And the reason I'm not going to make that suggestion is that it's a totally different JTBD, right? So like I want to engage, it's one desire. I want to feel engaged is a totally different desire, right? Like I want to be beautiful is one thing. I want to be like perceived as beautiful is a different thing. So I want to feel engaged is like,
it's psychological.
It's psychological, right? So that's the kind of thing to like, we really parse out what are the words here. I don't know if that's helpful.
And do we get into motivators at all?
No.
Okay. Just as a quick FYI.
Yeah.
We found there are three, motivations. So one might be psychological, like I want to feel engaged. Another is functional.
Mm-hmm.
I want to engage. That's a functional job.
Mm-hmm.
And another is social.
Mm-hmm.
I want others to think I'm engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary motivator, again, all of those motivations might be present, but one is going to rise to the top as the primary motivator. And how you language things, how you market, all of that can be really impacted. Even the product you build can be really impacted by what is motivating folks.
Yeah. And a quick note on Gavin's comment here. So I want to feel comfortable engaging with community while I'm physically separated from others. That, say those again. What are we saying again?
Finish your thought and then I'll say them again.
Okay. Awesome. That's a good alternative job statement or Jtbd statement, but I would treat it as a total alternative, because a product that is helping people feel engaged is going to have one set of success metrics, right? So you could say to people after they've been involved in these virtual events, did you feel engaged in community? Or on a scale of 0 to 10, how strongly would you say that you feel engaged with community? And a product that is helping people feel comfortable would need to be spec'd out totally differently, because it's the job is to help people feel comfortable, not to help people feel engaged. And so there's a different sort of orientation there. So that might be like a prerequisite for the second job of engaging others. So I would test those out and see what people resonate with most, and then make sure the product is built to address whatever kind of wins. But those are two different jobs statements. Is everyone clear on why those would be different? Okay.
And thanks, Meg. Answered Zosha's question.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so we always split out for every job to be done. When we're doing interviews, we say, do we believe this is primarily functional, social, or psychological? What is the major motivation behind this job to be done?
And we don't base it on our beliefs. We base it on the questions that we ask people.
Yeah, so when they're responding to interview questions, we're like, oh my gosh, I would feel so relieved if that happened. I'd feel so happy. I'd feel so good. The like, I feel is psychological. If they're like, it would be great because I would get a promotion at work, because people would see that I'm really good at my job. We're like, oh, you're socially motivated by others' perception of you, right? If it was our mission would be promoted, right? We would get to clean the water. That's functional, right? So how is it that they're orienting their motivation can be really telling. And we should probably keep moving.
We should.
So we're on to using competition to uncover Jtbds.
We are. Okay, so that was the workshop. And yeah, please use the QA list as it is helpful to you.
Yeah.
That is, if it is helpful, not
Yeah.
lawyer speak. We use weird words. Okay.
I will say just briefly, I've workshopped dozens of Jtbds. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Chantel. I'm glad. Dozens of Jtbds for our startups, or for clients, or just for friends' companies. And going through this process and like actually taking each of those questions seriously meant that at the end of it, the job statement was stronger. And usually there's like one or two things that really bump it up. You know, like when we were all looking at virtual spaces, how could that be? That was kind of the thing that I think helped this one step up a notch, right? But it was a really good starting Jtbd statement too. So it didn't have a lot of cleanup necessary. But usually we'll uncover a lot there. Okay, sorry, I interrupted competition.
Cool. So how do we use competition to uncover Jtbds in interviews? We talked a little bit about this the last time we were with you all, but we define competition as anything customers do to address Jtbds in the real world. Anything customers do to address Jtbds in the real world. So what have they tried before to make progress? Whatever the answer to that is, that's the competition. So in interviews,
Can I jump in here for a sec?
yeah,
Okay, so for example, Rebecca's former tribal governments who were her clients, you know, they're like trying to keep waterways clear. The assumption could have been, well, Rebecca's an attorney and Rebecca's law firm they're a law firm. So the competition is any other law firm, right? But that might not be reality. It might be that the tribal government, before hiring Rebecca, what they hired to do this job was trying to negotiate with that corporation directly, right? Maybe what they hired was having someone in-house send a letter to the state government. Maybe what they hired was like going out to coffee with the people who were polluting the water system and just explaining the issue and like being reasonable, right? And if that doesn't work, then you hire a lawyer. So the competition is not just lawyers. The competition is all of these other things, right? It's like potentially a negotiator. It's getting a nonprofit to come in and clean up the waterways.
protesters.
It's protests, right? It's like all of these other things. So when we're thinking about competition for jobs to be done, it's usually way broader than we're thinking about. And it also shows us that there's a much bigger market than what we're thinking about.
Mhm.
So the McDonald's milkshake example, we talked about this last time for those who were there. They're not just competing with Burger King milkshakes, they're also competing with bagels, and they're competing with bananas, and they're competing with donuts. They're competing with Egg McMuffins or whatever else, right? So like how entertaining are those things while filling your stomach?
How messy are they?
How messy are they? But like a podcast doesn't compete with a milkshake because it doesn't fill your stomach on the boring commute to work.
Even
right?
though
Which,
it entertains.
even though it entertains. Well, it's so that's where we want to spec out, like, can we have a really clear Jtbd statement? What's competing for that? Because then we can understand like what's really going on in the real world. Okay, sorry to
No,
interrupt
that's
you.
great. So in interviews, we ask people how strongly they identify with our draft Jtbd statement. We ask them how they improve it to make it more relevant to them. Again, we use that checklist to write a new version.
All the time.
Yep.
It's just a feedback cycle.
And so it creates the exact cycle you were talking about, the feedback loop. And is there?
I'll keep track of this if
Okay,
you want
cool.
to. Yeah.
So we're trying to learn about their past experiences of all 4 stages. So remember, that's context, desire for progress, barriers to progress, and timelines. So we want to ask about their past experience in each of those various sectors, because that's a good snapshot of what's gone on. And we focus on past.
I'm going
Yes.
to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
So basket of goods. Meg, do you mind explaining that phrase?
Sure. Sorry, that's the economics thing. Sorry.
Oh, no,
So you consider, would you consider then like a podcast and a banana as a basket set of
perfect.
to be a competitor? Like if,
Definitely. If they were both used at the same time. Yep.
yeah, like, okay.
Especially for some kind of partnership where like you signed up for the podcast and they sent you a banana or something.
But if someone's doing like homebrew or homegrown solutions,
True.
there's usually the way Christensen's team addressed it is they would say like they'd literally studied bananas. Are bananas good competitors to milkshakes? And they're not, because they're not entertaining enough. So then it would be good to study, what about bananas plus milkshakes or talk radio or Spotify playlists or whatever. Yeah, so basket of goods, that's perfect. Thank you. Yeah, okay.
Cool. Okay, yeah. So we focus on past behavior because it's the best predictor of what people will do in the future. Human brains are just really bad at predicting how we will feel, what we will think, what we will do in the future. We're just bad at it.
Can I give a concrete example of that?
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked about this last time a little bit, that, yeah, using past behavior is a really good predictor of future behavior. But there's a behavioral economic study where the scholars were looking at, they asked people, how do you think you will feel after you've had a colostomy? So you've had a big chunk.
Colonoscopy, right?
No.
Oh, colostomy.
Colostomy.
Okay.
So you've had a chunk of your colon removed. And now after this, you're gonna need to carry around a bag, and that's where your fecal matter goes, right? So you have to go through the surgery because of cancer or something. How do you think you're going to feel after that happens? So just quick survey, scale of 0 to 10. How do you think you will feel? Please type in your answer and just hit return if you had this procedure. Okay. Oh, 10 being like great. I feel excellent. I didn't set this up really carefully. Thanks for asking about the scale. That's a good question. Okay.
Cool.
So what they found was that people usually right after the surgery would have this huge dip in how they felt, right? And then they would return back to baseline. And however they felt 6 months before the surgery is how they felt 6 months after the surgery, right? So they acclimated to how they felt. And over time, it just became normal. But usually in our minds, we anchor to right after the significant thing happened, right? So it's not after for the rest of our lives. So our brains do all these kinds of tricks. And so when we're interviewing people, that's like a very narrow behavioral economics specific thing. But when we're interviewing people and they're like, yeah, I totally would buy blah, 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 or that thing sounds great. It's about as predictive of how would you feel after a colostomy. It doesn't usually predict future behavior. So we want to look at like, what have they done in the past? Because that's going to be your real competition the week after you launch whatever you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like whatever they were doing previously is your real competition. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we ask what they've done in the past 3 months to help them meet their desire for progress. Because again, that's the actual competition. What did they like about that? What did they dislike about that? And then we make sure that the product does what they liked and doesn't do what they didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that the competition and what they say really helps us zero in on the actual JTBD. It gives more and more detail about the type of progress that they're trying to make, and how people complain about the competition. That sketches out the progress people wish they could make, but they can't because of various barriers. So complaints are, people enjoy complaining, and it's super useful information.
Can I jump in before we move on to this?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, we talked about this last time, but since there are 21 new people,
Yeah.
3 types of competition that we usually use to just sort things into buckets, right? So there are incumbents. So incumbents would be like another law firm in Rebecca's case, right? But it'd be a better definition of an incumbent than that is anyone who believes that they stand to lose market share from your success, right? So like Dunkin' Donuts might believe that they would lose market share from McDonald's selling more smoothies or more milkshakes in the early morning. So then Dunkin' Donuts would become an incumbent. So they're a type of competitor, right? So often when we're thinking of like big businesses or small businesses or other organizations who are competing with us, often those are incumbents. Mm-hmm. So that's one form of incumbency, or one form of competition. Another is homegrown solutions. So when people are the DIY thing, Banana Plus podcast, right? That's a homegrown solution. We love homegrown solutions when we uncover them in interviews because it shows that people are not finding like paid solutions that they can use or they don't like what's out there. And then the third category is do nothing, right? So, and that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes they really want to do something and they're just totally stumped. But if people are doing nothing in response to the job to be done, we want to make sure it's because they can't find a good solution and they can't solve it themselves, not because they just don't care, right? So like if we were using JTBD theory to be like, how do we turn out more protesters at this event, right? Like do nothing is a really interesting form of competition. Why is it that people aren't showing up, especially when it's not COVID and all that? Okay.
Cool. So last time we shared a short list of questions for workshop purposes, but we have a little bit longer list to share with you today that is slightly more JTBD focused. There are some other questions on there as well, but it's a little bit focused on JTBDs. Just a caveat, these are examples. So we make interview guides for all of our interviews, and those interview guides are specific to whatever it is that we're trying to learn, whatever the JTBD is, whatever the product. We change what questions we ask, how we ask them, what order we ask them in. We might change them based on the role of the people we're interviewing. It's very specific. So I don't want you all to think, here's a list of questions, I'm going to go into my interview and not have read these and just ask them all. Don't do it.
But it's just like, it's a pool. It's an option. It's a pool of questions that you could pull from if they're helpful.
Yeah. So pick and choose what might be helpful. Use those. And
Nice.
Yeah, we like these questions, but again, they're just examples.
Yeah. Yeah. So are there, nice. I'm glad those are helpful. Yeah. Last time we shared a short list just because of a workshop, and then, yeah, didn't intend that list to be comprehensive. So there's a lot more we could do there. So, depending on time, Meg, we're down to do Q&A or like look through those questions together and see if anyone is curious what they're trying to get at, or we could just move on to the breakout groups. What sounds good to you, Meg, and everybody else?
Super good question. Why don't we, if you all can use the raise hand function, what we had planned is to go into small breakout rooms for 7 minutes, or we could stay and rotate through, or we could stay in large group if you're enjoying hearing feedback to everyone. So if you could use the heart reaction for staying in the main room and hearing everyone's feedback, or if you could use the thumbs up for desiring breakout rooms, that'd be great. Just looking around.
That's so much better of a way to vote than what we did.
Are the breakout rooms prompted, or what are we doing in them?
There are different prompts. We had them set up on AirMeet, but it looks like the big group stay together is the win. So there we go.
All right.
Cool.
Neutral too. Cool.
So yeah, if you all have questions
Yeah.
for us, we will answer them. If you want to look through the list of questions that we sent and see if there are questions based on that.
Yeah. There's some very specific questions in there. So.
So we have a lot of people very interested in coaching in our community, and a number of our grads that have launched coaching ventures and current students that have launched coaching ventures. So I think it might actually be, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, Adam, it might be an interesting overlap to talk about Adam's offering, because we also have a couple of current coaches that are students here, and helping to refine that job to be done statement.
Yeah, let me find it.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Adam, do you mind pasting it again, or if you have it?
Yeah, I have it right here. No problem. You can bring it back up.
And why don't we workshop it? And then if anyone else has other questions that pop up, we can just field those and not be locked into going through the workshop in order, if that sounds good. Okay. I want to easily communicate with my coaching clients and engage them in their development process. Okay, so just to clarify, Adam, are your customers the coaches themselves?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So should we go through them, workshop it?
Yeah.
Um,
And we have somebody commenting on the top
okay.
issue.
This is from the coach's perspective, a potential coach that wants to use my service.
Okay. Awesome. Good clarification. Yeah. Okay. And so one seems like we've satisfied it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
Be specific. So, are there ways to make this statement more specific?
Hmm.
We talk about development process.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just wondering if there's a more specific term there we could use.
Yes. Going from my mission statement, I didn't want to make this super long, but just appending it on, making it grammatically work, something like, and engage them in their development process by providing accessible personal development tools and allowing easy sharing of a coach's knowledge. So I'll paste that in the chat. It's kind of lengthy, but I guess that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, we'll need to trim it down. And were you pasting in the? There we go.
I was just making sure it read correctly.
Nice.
Trying to.
Okay. So just off the top, it's great. I think if we flip over to number 9, this is going to be our quickest gains, I think, for improving this. So we need to go through all of these in order.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had to say avoid using and or, how could we rephrase this statement in a way that just has one central desire? And anyone who is here, please feel free to just rewrite and paste.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't need for me to do that every time. And we'll just look at them and see, like, are there ways to do this without using the word and? And we don't have to capture everything. So. So Adam, what do you think, what are, I'm just going to back all the way out here before we QA. What's the context for this Jtbd statement? What's kind of the broader, what's the car?
Oh, I see what you mean. So maybe helping make the coach's job easier overall through easier communication as well as organization on the coach's side in terms of sharing their knowledge, and prompting their clients and engaging with them as coaches do.
Mm-hmm. And then for the context for that, we want to figure out, like, where are they doing that right now? How might the context introduce barriers? So are they digitally engaging with their clients? Are they
do you want me to like provide that from just what I've Okay. Coaches are, because of COVID, much more digital. Before it was lots of pen and paper and handing physical worksheets and that type of thing. Now it's lots of emailing PDFs, sharing documents that are virtual, that type of thing.
Okay. And cool. Then, so that's good context. And then the progress that they're trying to make and the barriers that they're hitting. I'm trying to get at, there's like a central desire for progress here that I don't think we've identified yet. So I'm going to look at these alternative statements for a second. And so there's communicating with coaching clients, and that's good, Gavin. And then provide easy tools. Helene, am I pronouncing that right? I know Rebecca already asked. Helani, thank you. Okay, cool. Helani, thank you. I'd rather ask and be embarrassed than just keep saying it wrong. Helani. So that's good. There are tools, but if we look at this list, we want to avoid references to like features or services. So I think we haven't quite identified the progress that the coaches want to make yet. And that's why we might be hitting multiple ands, because we're adding different features, right? And So I think there might be a central core component here that is like, I'm just going to say a crappy version of it. Like, I want to connect with my clients while we're in physically different spaces or something along these lines. There might be a simpler, lower level desire for progress here.
Yeah, I'm looking at all these and I just wrote one and I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay.
This is awesome statements everyone's sending, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to easily connect with my coaching clients.
That's easily twice, but besides, yeah, let me get rid of the second easily. Oh, wait. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what do you mean by connect? Or anyone else who is working on coaching too? Like, what does it mean to connect?
I would say, see, I'm trying not to use and, but to me, connect is building trust and having an open line of communication. So what would be, and then I kind of brought those together in connect. So how do I give more context without that?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's the end goal of coaching in general? Like, how do you know you're successful?
Well, it's ultimately up to the client to know that they're successful. So bringing them through the development process until that point, and as the coach using tools and prompts to evaluate whether the client's there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you think of this? Super simple. And we can build it out.
Mm-hmm.
And communication is in service of helping clients succeed.
Gotcha.
And it might be too simple. I mean, I'm sure we're missing important context here. So it's maybe like,
I'm just wondering if we can add a context. So I want to help my clients succeed when. What is the when?
Yeah.
There? What comes after when?
Maybe I want to help my clients succeed in their development process. Something, I don't know.
I think that's an improvement.
It's an improvement. I'm going to just remind us that we don't want to use process word.
Okay.
We're using process
in their development journey. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or in their development.
But is that still too abstract? Is that what needs improvement?
It is abstract. Yeah. I think if we could be more precise, that would help us. So yeah, one way we formulate JTBD statements when they're a little bit tricky like this is we'll say, what's the context? So, and we'll break up two different statements when we're drafting. So we'll have one that says, they're not complete sentences. When I blah, blah, blah is the first phrase. And then the second phrase is, I want to blah, blah, blah. So when I am driving on my boring commute to work, I want to feel entertained while filling my stomach, right?
So what is it that the clients are doing that they want to succeed in?
Yeah.
Well,
So how about when I communicate with my client, I want to help them discover and overcome their challenges.
Awesome. Let's go with that. Okay, let's QA that from the top.
Okay.
Don't you think?
Yeah. We should capture it. You got it?
Yep. We're good.
When I communicate with my client, I want to help them discover and overcome their challenges.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so is this from the customer's perspective?
Yeah, it's from the coach's perspective, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Is it specific?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so too.
I do too. And it could be more specific. So that's the kind of thing to note. Like if you discovered in interviews that people were saying, well, yeah, it's not just any challenge, it's personal growth challenges, or it's challenges in a business context, or, I'm sure you've actually learned all of these things, but
It's still nice to summarize this and add some specificity where necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
If you discover that.
Yeah,
And then write a grammatically correct sentence.
got that.
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay. Use terms consistently. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Would it exist in the same form regardless of available technology?
Yeah, it doesn't really, that's kind of like one later where it does it reference technology, right? Essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect.
Seems good there.
Usable and downstream activities. So do you ever try to help your clients discover and overcome their challenges when you're communicating with them?
Or like, how do you do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you help when you're communicating with your client? How do you help them discover and overcome their challenges? There are ways to use that downstream.
Yep. Avoid mentioning technology, solutions, products, services, features, and specifications. Are we? Yeah. Okay. Avoid process words like follow up, check, and review.
Looks good.
Okay. What about and or?
So can we make it?
I think that's
good, Gavin.
it is. I wonder if we can just simplify. I wonder if discover is implied in overcome. So you can't overcome it if you don't discover it.
That's fair, yeah.
So then, or maybe you can overcome it and it doesn't even matter because you didn't even know you had the problem in the first place, but now it's no longer a problem.
Or
but
you
now
know your problem heading in, so you're there to overcome it, that too.
Yeah, that could happen too. Right. So maybe it was overly specific before. But yeah, what do you think now? Adam, is this an okay statement, what we currently have?
Yeah, it could be more specific, like saying something like challenges in this or that area, not an or, but in this more specific area or something like that. But I kind of like it how it is. And as it is, it would be more adaptable right now to interview questions later anyways, being this simple.
Yeah.
I think that's right. And you can always make it more specific.
Which brings us to 10, be as brief as possible, given the other requirements. One way we could tweak it a little bit, very little bit, is remove the word there. When I communicate with my client, or when I communicate with clients,
there we go.
I want to help them discover, or excuse me, my copying and pasting is. Stand by.
I want to help them overcome challenges, just that simple.
Yep.
There you go.
So that is pretty brief. And it could also flip around and say, I want to help clients overcome challenges while we're communicating. Like you could flip it around, but I think with this framing here, when I communicate with clients, I want to help them overcome challenges, sets up an opportunity to just say, okay, what are the barriers to progress, right? Like you're communicating remotely, that's a barrier to progress. You have to share PDFs, that's a barrier to progress. You need to set up video chats, that's a barrier to progress, right? And then if your product removes those barriers to progress, then you're helping them do what they want to do. Does that?
Yeah, that tracks and aligns so far, but
Okay.
it's good to, yeah, this is a great overall summary and allows me to kind of look at it from a new perspective, which is great.
Awesome.
Cool.
And I think the important thing here is to tease out, like, is what I'm putting in the Jtbd statement the progress that the customer wants to make? Or am I trying to detail barriers to progress? Or am I trying to detail features that would be in our product?
It's really easy to get caught up in those latter two.
It is, especially when we're trying to make things more precise. And that's just a different part of the interview process, to be like, okay, there's this core thing. If the product can help the customer do this core thing, then we've succeeded. So like keeping it as simple as possible is really important. Adam, how are you feeling about it now? I know you've already mentioned this a little bit, but.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about it, and I think I'm gonna make it into an interview question moving forward. So yeah, thank you for the feedback, and I saved the workshop document too, because I'm just gonna keep it. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Can I ask, has anybody had the chance to look at that list of questions, and did that raise any questions for anyone? Yeah, Gavin, what were you? Feel free to just talk.
I feel like this one probably gets brought up a lot, but I wanted to hear you guys elaborate a little bit more on the magic wand question. I've heard a lot of discourse about it. Some people really like it, some don't. I'm wondering, like, specifically, like, what situations do you employ that kind of question? Like, where do you have to be at in the customer development process to feel that it's time for that?
Yeah. So we ask it pretty regularly from the get-go, and generally it's best to avoid any would questions. This is an imagination question.
Yeah.
So you can't say, like, when you had a magic wand, unless you live in a world that I wish I lived in.
Yeah.
Where magic wands were real.
That's the progress we desire to make.
But since you can't ask about past behavior there, the question takes a form that we don't generally recommend questions take. So we ask from the first interview, if you had a magic wand and could get rid of any real world constraints, how would you change the process of X? What would you do to change the process of X?
Of helping your clients overcome challenges.
Yeah. And the answers there help us understand the desired progress in a way that that is helpful. So it's not necessarily helping us understand again their past behavior, but more if they could do anything, what is it? And it's just one other way of getting at desired progress, but it doesn't work if that's the only thing you ask.
Kind of throw in two things here. So one is, like, interviews can be, let's see. Yeah, that sounds great. So do you mind getting back to that?
No.
Yeah, magic wand question, I think, is most of what we're asking is trying to uncover known unknowns, things that we're aware that we don't actually know, right? The magic wand question helps uncover unknown unknowns, where we have no idea really how this person's going to answer. And so they'll often throw out stuff that is, like, totally useless. So this is like a Pareto principle, 80-20 rule kind of question, where 80% of the time it's not valuable at all. And people get, at least for us, people give answers that are just throwaway answers, and that's fine, but then 20% of the time they'll say something where, like, we hadn't even been thinking about that. And now we're thinking about the Jtbd from a new angle, or there are these 4 product features that you just spec'd out for us, that we didn't even think about asking about. So they're really, really good at, like, every once in a while uncovering some unknown unknowns. But I think this is why people have mixed opinions about magic wand questions, because most of the time they're not valuable, and then some of the time they're very valuable. So yeah.
I also find with interviewees, they like answering that question. So it can just be nice to throw in when you're asking a bunch of questions that can feel either heavy or just sort of like not as exciting maybe. It's just fun for people to use their imaginations. And so generally I get people like, wait, I can have a magic wand. And it just sort of breaks it up and is nice to throw in.
Yeah.
So cool. Just tiny little follow-up on that. How is that different positioning wise to the question, what would your ideal solution to Jtbd look like?
So, excuse me, what would your ideal solution look like is a narrower frame. And so people often think about it in the context they currently work in, right? Or are operating in. It's not just work. We often interview people in a professional capacity, but, like, in their professional capacity, but whatever they're doing, they're already in this mode trying to solve the problem, right? And so they think narrowly. And when you say, if you could just wave a magic wand, they're like, oh, I would just mean it, like magically I would be able to like have a mind meld with my clients while I'm coaching them and just like instantly transfer information back and forth. So I know where they're stuck, because we're always getting lost and like conversation loses so much meaning. Right. But they might not say that if they're like, what, if you say, what's your ideal solution? They might be like, well, Zoom plus, Google Docs sharing and, like it's just how narrow is the focus, but it gets at similar things. And sometimes people use imagination in the same way and answer the same way. So there can be a lot of overlap, but the magic wand question definitely broadens it out. Does that help? Cool.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Meg said, it's the ideal solution is within the realm of the known.
Yeah, great way to say it.
And then we have a question here. Where would a JTBD fit in a S
In a
bit?
BIC, right?
Yeah, is that what that is? I can't read. Oh dear, I need new glasses.
So we're gonna send y'all out into breakout rooms, and Jonathan and Rebecca might give you the prompt, and Emma Rose, we will give you that answer right away when you come back.
Okay. Awesome. Good point.
Do you want to frame up the question, or do you want me to?
Sorry, are you asking
For their breakout room question? Do you want me to frame it, or you?
We don't have a breakout room question. Do you have a breakout room?
Well, yes, we would love for them to go into the breakout rooms and figure out what they're going to apply to their project in the next couple of days.
Cool.
Okay.
And then we'll have them come back so that everyone makes their learning relevant to them.
Nice.
Sounds great.
So feel free to stay in here or come back if you're there, Jackson's.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Who put me in charge? Sorry. It didn't reset my it didn't auto assign y'all, sorry. Can I change host and have someone who's resetting? I don't see you all visibly. Shan, can you set up breakout rooms for me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. It's not resetting my settings. Sorry. So just random breakout rooms, 4 minutes. Thank you. Yeah, so we just wanted you to, of all the wonderful things that you've heard today from the Jacksons, what might you apply over the next several days to your venture?
I'm definitely going to be applying some of these some of the stuff about like the JTBC with the interview questions and.
Great. Great. Did it work for you, Sharon? Okay, yeah, if you can send everybody off, that'd be great.
Working on it.
Oh, cool. It was trying to make me assign rooms rather than auto assign for some reason, so.
Me too. I'm just doing it.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for doing that. Aren't they amazing? What good learning we have from this session. Thanks, Allie. If anything's jumped out to you in particular, feel free to throw it in the chat thread as Shanna's setting up those rooms, or verbalize it. Shan, just let us know when you're shipping us off, if you don't mind.
Okay, there's a lot of people in each room because it only had 5 rooms, unfortunately, but
Cool. Well, super quick, maybe a couple of you can share out what you're going to do going forward in your breakout room, and then come on back to close out class and give a warm
They're all
thanks to
gone, Meg. Everyone's
Oh.
gone.
Cool.
Yeah, I think they were sent out
Yeah.
gradually instead of all at once.
yeah.
Oh, Lord help me. I
You're
did
good.
set up very elegantly though. Yeah, that was weird because when I tried to set up breakout rooms, I selected allow people to assign because I thought we were going to go a different direction, and then I was unable to put it back to automatically. Anyway, sorry, little semantics.
I think I just started kind of writing out my first BIC for my like senior project venture that I'm working on. And I'm like gonna start like the interview process. So this is like perfect for me as I'm kind of like formulating my initial questions and like building that first empathy.
So
with
Tara, what's
customers.
the big idea canvas? What's a BIC?
Oh, what's a BIC? It lays out who your customer is, your value proposition, your offering, who you are, and why you're good, why you're good for this venture. What the gap is in the market, and the current solutions. So things that people are currently doing to solve whatever problem statement that you've identified.
So is this business something canvas?
Well,
business big idea canvas. So it kind of lays out you start with your problem and opportunity statement. So it's like, I see an opportunity to or people are having a hard time like seeing street signs in the dark, so there's an opportunity to use lighting so they can see them better. Our customer is people who drive in the dark, or whatever. And then
it's an invention of the program, the Big Idea Canvas.
Okay.
They came about because we do human-centered entrepreneurship and innovation, and a lot of times people were ramping into the venture too quickly without figuring out why it mattered to them as an entrepreneur and why it mattered to their customer. The value proposition canvas wasn't adequate to demonstrate that in an early venture. So it is, I'll show you screen share. But now we need to make our own thing, which maybe we could make a combined thing with the Jacksons and copyright it, because I'm serious.
Yeah.
Because I don't this because we so often people end up in a venture that they don't care about, that nobody really cares about. So this is the first thing we do, but really we want to modify the business model canvas value proposition, the big idea canvas, into a better solution in general that merges and removes some of them. But so Emma Rose was asking about that because she's in the second quarter of the program. And so what we seek to have them do is really understand what the value proposition canvas, and then how they're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Meg, it seems like, if the big idea canvas is the first thing we do, it's inviting us to already like create an offering before we've done any empathy, right? You know what I mean? Because I feel like usually we start with a big idea canvas and then we have to fill out all the boxes. And then we go and start doing interviews. So if we had something before we, fill in, you know what I mean? Or should I
Yeah,
explain?
what ideally people are supposed to be doing is filling out the right-hand side of the value proposition canvas, where they figure
Right.
out the customer profile, like
Right.
what are the customer jobs, aids and gains, and then we use the big idea canvas and the left-hand side.
So that's what we should be doing first.
Yeah, but we're just learning so much always
Mhm.
as the program comes into more and more. Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
And we use JTBD and value proposition. We'll just like swap out JTBD for value proposition if clients say value proposition, we'll just say, okay, here is the JTBD, which is the value proposition, So it just can plug in there very neatly. The value is we're helping people make this type of progress.
I think the big difference is that oftentimes people write value propositions from their own perspective rather than the customer's perspective.
Yeah.
So, and that's not like, that's how it should be. It's just, I think, what happens frequently.
Yeah.
But if you write it from the customer's perspective, then they're interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. And we're all back now.
So let's hear a couple of, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was trying to keep it back.
So as we wrap up our amazing time together, would a couple of you be willing to share out what you decided in your rooms you're going to do in the next couple of days to make those next steps forward in customer discovery?
Yeah, I can. Mine are kind of basic actually, because I've never been that great at coming up with the interview questions. So having this kind of criteria in a way really helps me, come up with better ones, because especially when I don't know if it was Jonathan, or I'm sorry, I forget your name, but they said don't use would you questions, the magic wand type of stuff. That was like I had a feeling not to use them, but I never really had any confirmation until you said it. And I was like, yeah, that obviously, that makes sense. It makes so much sense. I'm definitely going to change my interview questions so they don't say, would you do this or would you do that? That's definitely a big step I'm going to take.
Thanks.
For me, since I had the pleasure of getting my statement all fleshed out by two professionals, I'm going to A/B test it with different customers I'm going to be interviewing soon. That'd be super helpful with different terms, like engaging and connecting. So
nice.
I think something I'm going to do is make sure we're taking note of motivators that are coming into play when we're getting responses from potential clients or beneficiaries, understanding why we're getting the responses we're getting. And I think just that next level of analysis is really important to gaining traction from these interview cycles.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, if everybody could pull up their chat thread, and if you were to craft one sentence, that would be what you would take away from this time together today as a student needs statement, what might that be? So you, as a customer in this room, how would this have been discovered for you? So pull up those chat threads or throw any encouraging words in there, thanks to the Jacksons. So I'll give you a few moments to type those statements in there. And we'll do a little 3, 2, 1.
Sorry, Meg, I'm like a little confused on the question. What was it? One more time.
Oh, just feel free to put anything in there that jumped out to you in this talk. That's great. Thanks, Anthony. Okay, 3, 2, 1, enter. Awesome. Jonathan or Rebecca, would you read those out? Whatever jumps out to you.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Do you want to read?
Awesome. That interview questions are nuanced all the way down to word choice, connecting with the customer, valued workshop. Thanks. I don't want to read the ones that are just compliments. It feels weird. There's a lot.
3 motivations.
Customer insight development. Jtbd is awesome.
Phrase from the customer perspective and not the product or offering perspective.
Feel confident in the data I collect. Nice Jtbd.
Yeah. Different types of competitors.
Yeah. Awesome.
Awesome.
You all are so lovely.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us your time and attention.
Well, thank you so much. It was super great to have you here again tonight. And yeah, thank you so much. So great.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So attendance likely is up because Tara's like remarkably on top of things, our wonderful pterodactyl.
Yeah, it's up.
Okay, so please feel free to take that and share some more feedback. This is an amazing time for you all in the quarter. We've had Ugly But Tasty. You've learned a ton more about customer discovery, and we're just so excited to keep pacing forward on your ventures together. And we are here to support and encourage you. So do keep going with that traction. And if you haven't started Change Leadership yet, especially if you're an E5, you need to, because it takes 3 weeks. So be sure you checked out that. It's, half of what we look at together is how we are developing as human-centered entrepreneurs. So be sure you're checking that out.
You all, it's still light outside.